Second part. The town's ability to insulate itself from the storm had reached its limits. Breakers in 4 of the 5 electrical discharge towers had burnt out from the overload, and the remaining tower was down to 50% effectiveness. Nuclear reactor number 1. Energy level at 52% over normal capacity. Number 2 is 57% over. She's got all she can handle. Number 3 is 69% over. Well into the danger zone. Danger, danger, danger. Navigational control room. How many minutes more until we've cleared the magnetic storm? Mayor Ming asked. We can't be certain. According to our data, this magnetic belt is approximately 2.95 miles wide. At our present speed, that'd be 5 minutes, 19.6 seconds. Report what degree of danger the town would face in that 5 minutes if we were to shut down energy absorption for 1, 2, or all 3 of our reactor towers. If all 3 towers are shut down, town will be destroyed in 2 minutes and 22 seconds. 2 towers. Town will be destroyed in 3 minutes and 5.4 seconds. 1 tower. Town will be destroyed in 5 minutes and 21.3 seconds. Keep only the number 1 reactor in operation. Increase cruising speed to 25 miles per hour. That's insane. The outer shell will suddenly be taking 3 times as much voltage. It'll blow the reactor. I realize it's crazy, the mayor said. But we can't do a damn thing unless we get clear of this storm. Roger that. The instant the other 2 nuclear reactors stopped absorbing power, and the remaining energy turned at once on the number 1 reactor, snapping at it like the fangs of a crazed beast. Fire shot from the energy flow control system in 5 of the safeties, and the now unbalanced flames of nuclear fusion quickly drove the needle toward the danger zone. In no time at all, pale blue flames had burst through the bottom plates of the town and were shooting wildly into the air. Page break indicated by a small cross. Racked by the powerful shocks, Lori gave a silent scream and clung desperately to her bed. Dr. Srugi ran to her. Shouting Lori's name, he threw himself at her and pulled her tight to him. Lori clung to his warm chest. The physician's heart kept pounding wildly. He's just as scared as I am, Lori thought. For the first time, she found herself feeling something other than curiosity toward the young doctor. Page break indicated by a small cross. Ahead of the town, there wriggled a particularly large and fierce serpent of light. Lightning crackled from every inch of it, and when bolts from it brushed the craggy cliffs to either side of it, the surface was fused into glass or rained down on the town. Chunks of rock crashed through the roof of a house somewhere, and a woman could be heard screaming. A compressor in one of the factories took a hit as well, turning the braided steel air hose into a high-voltage cable that whipped into workers' bodies and scalded their faces. White light engulfed the town. Silicon polymer roofs were being blown off houses, and whole trees were being sucked up into the sky, roots and all. People scrambled into their basements for protection. The fierce suction assailed D as well. His traveler's hat and the hem of his coat began to rise. Securing the hat's wide brim with his left hand, D drew his sword with his right. Turning the blade over, he drove it into the earth. Kneeling, he waited. Pebbles flew up, and roofing materials followed right after them. Page break indicated by a small cross. The true mayhem was concentrated in the reactor and navigation control centers. A serpent of light that slipped in through a fresh hole in the wall thrashed ruthlessly through the bulkhead, flinging workers everywhere. The pungent odor of burnt flesh filled the air. Snagging a flying worker with one hand, the mayor slammed him back against the floor. The old man's strength was incredible. Raising his voice, he asked, "Can't correct our computers, am I right?" "No, it's no use." Then switch to manual controls. Mayor Ming snapped back. Manual controls on these were scrapped over 500 years ago. The mayor's face took on the fierceness of a demon. Pulling the serpent of light that was devastating his surroundings to his chest, the mayor tore it apart with his bare hands. Black smoke rose from his hands and his torso. His hair stood on end, and lightning leapt around in his mouth. "Where the hell are we going?" he said. "Who's doing this, and where do they think they're taking my town?" Dee heard the ride of life and death all around him. Kneeling, and gripping the sword he'd driven into the earth, he looked like an obsidian statue. With all the elements howling furiously around him, he alone remained unaffected. Light filled the air above him. A serpentine form twice as thick as any man could get his arms around was dropping toward Dee, scorching the air molecules as it went. Here was the leader of this deadly swarm. Never breaking his pose, Dee flew backward. Passing him in midair, the serpent fell to the ground and broke in half before taking to the air once again. Page break indicated by a small cross. The magnetic belt is pulling away from the town. Pull out of it at full speed. As if in response to that joyful cry, a blue-black space stretched across the forward view screen. A sky sealed in tranquil darkness without a hint of blinding light, as if beaten off by the winds gusting against them. The lights coloring the town began to fall off behind them. "We're clear!" someone shouted. Cheers suddenly filled the air. Page break indicated by a small cross. When Sheriff Hudding called on Ming, some 3 hours had passed since the mayor had left one of the workers in charge of overseeing the removal of the radioactive waste. The sheriff found Ming settled into a chair in his private chambers. "How are the townsfolk?" the mayor asked in ill humor, his eyes shut. "They're finally settling down. We're looking into the number of injured now," the sheriff said in a tone that sounded somewhat intrigued. "Then, I guess there were no fatalities." "Yeah. Surprisingly few wounded, too. Hard to believe no one got electrocuted. Radiation poisoning's been pretty minor, to boot. We have that medicine I came up with 40 years ago to thank for that. Anyway, what do you want?" The mayor opened his eyes. Somewhat reproachfully, he added, "You ought to still be out there." "Actually, I've come to gab about old times with you," the sheriff said, smiling at him. The mayor had never seen him smirk like that. "You happen to remember Ende Ramparts? He was a 12-year-old kid." The expression that formed on the mayor's face was that of an entirely different person. "Just what the hell do you think you're doing? Poor kid had a muscular disease they could have treated well enough in a town on the ground, but you hated the idea of anyone getting off. Told him the condition was untreatable, and he ended up offing himself as a result, didn't he? Hey! How about that time with Ebenezer Vilzuya?" the sheriff continued, stroking the barrel of his rocket launcher. "That one I had a hand in. We were in the middle of a famine, and he stole a half-pound more synthetic butter than he was supposed to get. His kids were on the brink of starving. The rest of the town pretended not to notice. After all, no one else was half as bad off as his family. Why, even you were pretty easy on him at first. But in the end, you just couldn't find it in you to let the first man to break the rules in the town you made to get away with it. So, this cuss here, who was just a deputy at the time, went in and gunned down his whole family, and then made it look like suicide. The mayor got up out of his chair and barked, "Who the hell are you?" "It's me. Take a good look now. I'm the one and only Sheriff Hutton. Given name, Bailey Hutton. Height, 9 feet 9 inches. Weight, 535 pounds. Place of birth, 334th sector of the Eastern Frontier. I first came on board." A loud crack resounded at his jaw. The massive frame of 535 pounds lurched backward and rolled on the floor. Dashing over, the mayor was just about to stomp his right foot down on the giant's throat when the barrel of the rocket launcher rose from the floor to stop him. "Hey now, cut that out. I don't care how tough you are. 7 blasts from this will send you straight to the hereafter," the sheriff said, rubbing his jaw as he got back up. He was like a walking mountain. If someone had opened the door just then, they wouldn't have seen anything besides his back. On the other hand, the mayor stood only 5'8" and weighed less than 150 pounds. Though nutritional supplements might have helped to explain how he'd lived to be over 200, the punch he'd just delivered was beyond anything imaginable. Oh, that's smart. You pack more of a wallop than I'd heard," the sheriff said as he nursed his jaw. But his voice was clearly that of another person. "Oh, it's you. Got one hell of a strange power there," the mayor said, not seeming particularly upset as he went back to his chair. He must have figured that as long as he knew what and whom he was dealing with, he could do away with them whenever he pleased. "I thought you were a bit of a shady character from the moment I heard you were Dee's partner. And then you go off possessing our sheriff and stealing his memories. Well, what exactly do you intend to do next?" "Nothing serious. Really. Compared to what a heavyweight scoundrel like you gets away with, what I'm asking for is small potatoes." "I see. And that would be—" "I want what the knights left you." "Really?" "I've been over every inch of that house, and I couldn't find a thing. From what they told me, it seems you wanted it too. In which case, it's pretty obvious where it'd have to be now." "Unfortunately, I don't know its location either." Sitting there in his chair, the mayor spread his hands in a display of innocence. "When I found out you tried to save them, I very much wanted to ask you exactly the same thing." "I see. So, you were the one behind that whole little act about bringing me in for stealing some flowers," the sheriff said in Pluto the Eighth's voice, grinning at him as the biker would. "Too bad about that, but you see, I've got no proof what you're telling me is true. Worse yet, your town's got these vampires running around and no one knows when the hell they got on." "Got on?" he snorted. "That's a laugh. Of course no one would know when. They've been here since the very beginning, after all." The voice suddenly became that of the sheriff. 6 months back, on your orders, I snatched Dumper Griswell and Deanne Will. And didn't have the foggiest notion what you intended to use them for, but no one in town was going to miss a couple of worthless drunks. And if things as they are now, I kind of have to wonder, did them two maybe get themselves turned into vampires? And just what would you do if they did? The mayor said menacingly. Hey now, I thought I told you not to move. Besides, trying to do anything to me won't accomplish anything. Your sheriff here is the one who will take the lumps. Well, I'll just go back to my old body and slip into someone else. Hell, I could even use your own daughter. And could you move into another body from the one you're in now? The mayor asked. Yep. Then maybe you ought to try possessing me. That way you'll know straight away whether I'm telling the truth or not. Wow. Knock me over with a feather. Are you sure about this? I'll be privy to your every little secret. I don't mind a bit. After all, this way, you'll see it'd be in your interest to join forces with me for a little while. Join forces. That's right. We're both after the same thing, but there are any number of ways it might be used. I see. So long as your use and mine don't conflict, we'd be fine. Good enough. What do you do about the sheriff? I'll screw with his brain a bit and leave him snoozing. Make sure no one comes in here for a while. The mayor spoke into his intercom, saying something to the effect that no one was to be let into his chambers. He turned to face the sheriff. One of the giant's hands latched onto his deeply wrinkled wrist. 2 seconds passed, then 3, and then, with a crash that shook the whole room, 535 pounds of lawman fell over like a tree. An expression of amazement that wasn't his at all quickly formed on the mayor's face as he sat there with his eyes shut. I can't believe that. The voice that slipped from his dry lips was choked with fear, almost as if his own thoughts terrified him. Who could do such an awful thing, and you still call yourself, or should I say myself, human? Chapter 4, End.